The rain fell in soft, silvery sheets over the city, painting the cracked pavement with tiny mirrors that reflected the tired lights of morning. It was one of those days when people buried their faces in scarves and hurried past one another, each lost in their own private storm. And amid the quiet chaos, a tall man in a worn hoodie stepped onto the 47B city bus, his head slightly bowed, his hood pulled low. No one noticed him, not yet. Because no one expected Kennedy Holt, one of the most recognizable figures in the country, to be taking the morning bus like any other commuter. For months, Kennedy had been drowning in noise, the cameras, the speeches, the meetings. He was praised and criticized in equal measure, his name tossed around in headlines that felt more like weapons than words. And that morning, he'd done something unthinkable for someone in his position. He'd left his security detail behind, put on old jeans, and slipped out of his penthouse without telling a soul. No assistants, no photographers, no advisors. Just him and a few wrinkled bills he'd shoved into his pocket. He wanted, for the first time in years, to listen. The bus smelled of rain and cheap coffee. The driver, an older man with graying temples, barely glanced up as Kennedy dropped his coins in the box and found a seat at the back. The hum of the engine and the soft patter of raindrops against the windows were oddly comforting. He watched people file in, nurses in scrubs, a mother with two sleepy kids, a young man in a delivery uniform checking his cracked phone screen. No one looked twice at him. And that anonymity felt like a breath of air after being underwater too long. Midway through the ride, the bus jerked to a stop. A young woman boarded, holding an old guitar case and shivering slightly. She scanned the seats and took the empty spot beside Kennedy. Her eyes were tired, but they held that quiet fire of someone who hadn't given up yet. "Rough morning?" Kennedy asked softly, careful to keep his voice low. She smiled faintly. "More like a rough life." There was a small laugh, but it wasn't bitter, it was honest. Kennedy saw the frayed edges of her jacket, the calluses on her fingers, and the faint smudge of paint on her wrist. "You play?" he asked, nodding at her guitar case. "Trying to," she said. "Open mics, subway corners. Sometimes I make enough to eat. Sometimes not." She shrugged. "But you know what they say, every bus ride is one step closer to somewhere." Kennedy chuckled. "That's a good line." She looked at him curiously. "You sound like someone who's seen both sides of the world." He hesitated, then smiled. "Maybe I have." As the bus rattled down the wet road, they talked about dreams, the kind people whisper to themselves before the world teaches them to be quiet. She spoke of wanting to write songs that mattered. Kennedy listened, truly listened, feeling something stir inside him that had long been buried under layers of fame and politics. Then,